Welcome to the Meta Woman podcast. We address the issues, opportunities, and challenges facing women in the development of the metaverse, the biggest revolution since the internet itself. Every week, we bring you conversations with top female talent and business executives operating in the gaming and crypto industries. Here's your host, Lindsay the Boss Poss. The Meta Woman podcast starts now. Hello, and welcome to the Meta Woman podcast, part of the Holodeck Media Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Lindsay the Boss Poss, and from struggle to success, we're covering it all. To our returning listeners, thank you so much for listening every week. Thank you for leaving reviews. Thank you for engaging with me, sending me your thoughts. And for all the new listeners out there, I hope you enjoy and I hope you'll come back next week. This is going to be such a fun conversation about esports and the market in Southeast Asia. I'm delighted to welcome Jen Hall, Head of Strategic Partnerships in Southeast Asia and India for Ampverse. Jen, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this for ages.
Yes, me too. To start, I would love for you to tell me a little bit about your current position and about just Ampverse as a company. I know we're going to walk through a lot of the background, but I definitely want to hear, what you do, what you love, what it's all about at Ampverse.
Oh, sure. So thanks very much for the introduction. So I am Head of Strategic Partnerships at Ampverse, and we are a gaming and entertainment company operating across Southeast Asia and South Asia. So our vision really is to bring inspiration to every gamer everywhere. So we're on a real mission to develop innovative esports teams, talents, and also products. So we own and operate championship-winning esports teams across the region, Thailand, Vietnam, India, soon to launch in the Philippines, and then Indonesia, probably at the latter part of this year or early next year as well. So I can sort of talk a little bit about my role as well at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, for those of you that are listening and not watching, you should definitely go look at the YouTube video because Jen's cat is just being an absolute all-star, making a great appearance today. So happy to welcome pets on the show.
She's such an attention seeker. She absolutely loves it. So going back to sort of my role, here she is again. It really splits into kind of two key parts. So the first part is all about product development. So for us, it's all about focusing on developing our own IP. And really for the gaming and esports communities that sit at the intersection, of course, of popular culture. So initially, when we first launched back in 2019, we were really focused on our esports teams and sponsorship opportunities, and also very much on sort of the influencer campaigns. And this really made sense for a lot of brands as well that we were partnering with, because, of course, for a lot of them, they were really just starting to dip their toes into sort of gaming and esports space. But as things have developed, obviously the industry has matured somewhat, and now having secured our Series A, developing our own IP products has become a really kind of crucial part of that. So it's everything from developing original content series to fan-powered events and tournaments, and also now very much focused as well on Web3, the metaverse, and also this space of NFT and activations, which I know we'll be talking more about later. So that's kind of the first part. So it's really about product. And then the second part, I'm very focused as well, obviously, on the partnership side. So for us, it's about focusing on where are those mutually beneficial partnerships that we can find that will help to elevate the profile of our esports teams and talents. And at the same time, of course, be able to elevate the presence of that brand as well across the gaming and esports communities in the region. So that can be anything from sort of partnerships with music labels and artists through to apparel brands, also charities, and also as well with media and broadcasting as well, particularly for the original content.
So many things to dig into. And I was, we started chatting right before this. And so there's a question that I really, really want to ask first, even though it's not even close to the first question on the list that I have written here. But with talking about developing partnership strategies and sponsorship strategies and being a relatively young organization, 2.5 to 3 years is probably actually quite old for esports, but it's also young in terms of building a company and fleshing out a strategy. And so much of that was the COVID pandemic, which just threw a wrench in everyone's business plans.
I would love to talk about, because you mentioned that you started with a lot of influencer partnerships and things like that. And how has it changed from content marketing focused to event focused? Like, what is how have you been approaching partnerships from the, like, we were just talking about it, but IRL versus digital? So you have like the IRL, the events, the teams, all that stuff that you can do all kinds of fan engagement with. And then you also have social media, Twitch streams, all that stuff that you can do digital engagement with. So how has this changed in the third year, and what are you kind of looking forward to with balancing those two things?
Yeah, great question. So I think in the past, and obviously during COVID, everything had to move online. So, being given that Gen Z and millennials really are the core of the gaming space as well, particularly, and very much from an esports perspective as well. It really wasn't too much of a difficult transition, as you mentioned already. Everyone engaging with all of these platforms like YouTube and Facebook, and also to some degree in this region as well with Twitch, although I would say to a slightly lesser extent. So really, it was very natural for us. I think for a lot of brands, as I mentioned, sort of gaming was really quite abstract, and that no one really kind of understood it. But as we went through the COVID period, it was really about a process of education. Obviously, gaming grew and esports as well exponentially. And a lot of brands started to realize the importance of, understanding this space. So it was really very important for us to start at the education phase and developing a lot of sort of insights around that to really help the brands understand. And so, sort of the natural progression for them was to start with the influencers. It's something that they knew, obviously, outside of gaming. And so, obviously, that was kind of an easy in. And of course, for us, the data element behind that was really important, just showcasing the sheer amount of engagement that was happening and the level of viewership as well, both for our esports teams, but also for the influencers that we have as well in the market. And it really was a whole different combination of different content formats as well. So everything from, the sort of online esports tournaments through to watching our KOLs in gameplay. And then also off the back of that, then sort of entertainment series that actually, UGC was a huge part of that. And of course, that didn't really interrupt our gaming KOLs. Like they could still capture a lot of footage and create entertaining content from home. So that was kind of the first part. And then that really then started to develop more into kind of tournaments as well. So things like online show matches with some of these top influencers, which proved really engaging. And I've actually kind of got some other examples to be able to share later. And so brands really started to see the benefit of engaging with these sort of different types of online formats as well during that time. And, they're all trying to fight for eyeballs. And of course, this is where everyone was drawn to during that time as well. So it was a great opportunity to engage with the community then. But it really did come back to kind of showcasing the data behind that to really kind of give them that level of reassurance.
Have you noticed, and again, we were actually just speaking about this before, but on the consumer end, have you noticed if people are finally starting to kind of come back to in-person events, or has there been more of a strong preference for online stuff still? Like, are you seeing that uptick at all?
Really good question. So, to be honest, in the first part of this year, I would say it's definitely still been very much more focused on the online. I think a lot of people were still kind of treading carefully earlier in this year, particularly in a lot of these Southeast Asia markets. It took a lot longer for us to sort of come out the other side of things like lockdowns versus a lot of the Western countries. So the focus was still very much online. I think last year, share a kind of couple of examples with you. I think one of the examples that we have from Thailand was we ran a online sort of show match and tournament last year for Nescafe to be able to promote their espresso product that they were launching in the market. And their key objective, because they couldn't reach consumers offline, was to really generate awareness through the Gen Z audience, but also to drive actual purchase. So we actually set up an online tournament with our top gaming influencers in Thailand and ran a competition. So for every espresso can that was purchased, the shopper could actually register that purchase online, and then they had a chance to win a spot to play in the tournaments with their influencer idols and win all sorts of cool prizes at the same time. So that was a
That is
really
such a cool activation.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really
super cool.
neat.
It was really well received. We actually just won an award for it from the Media Agency Association of Thailand, which was really exciting. But yeah, I think that was a great example of how, you know, a brand really engaged with this space and really understood the benefits of being able to activate through an online initiative as well with the community. And of course, ultimately, sort of still drive that engagement and purchase behavior as well. And then another example this year that we ran actually in India was a collaboration with Gillette. So we created a pro esports tournament online called the Gillette and 7C Invitational, which we ran in partnership with Sky Esports, our partner in India. And we achieved over 83 million impressions for that particular campaign. It was a 9-day tournament, all online, a fantastic opportunity for our audience as well to be able to engage with the Gillette brand. And in fact, we have just run a community survey recently with our 7C community. And we've seen fantastic results in terms of that brand sentiment as well for Gillette and their Mac 3 product, which essentially was a partnership that they forged as well with BGMI in the market. So a lot of it has still very much been these kind of online activations in various different forms. But certainly a big focus for me now as well in my role is all about these in-person fan-powered events as well. So we're starting to build out hyper-local events in each of our local markets. We're thinking of this in a very broad way, though. So it's all about sort of gaming and lifestyle. So there are various different elements that we're going to be interacting into those sort of programs, everything from sort of the esports element side to also Web3 with play and earn gaming. So giving the community an opportunity to participate and learn about the opportunities with the play and earn based games, with NFTs as well, which we will also be integrating into the space. And I think, yeah, those kind of opportunities to actually bring the fans together in person and an opportunity to sort of interact in that level, and also ensure that we've got a lot of immersive experiences that they can join in person as well will be really important. But I really think that it's, the two are very synergistic. You know, there's a huge amount of overlap between the online and offline. So whilst a lot of these offline events will be taking place, it's still absolutely crucial that a lot of this is captured for the online audience at the same time.
That makes sense. I have kind of two follow-up questions there, especially since we started talking about Web3 and NFTs, which is great. So much fun for me. The first, and this is backing up a little bit, but what are the major streaming providers that you use? And I'm curious because I know about, you know, Bilibili and Douyu in China, but I don't know how far that market extends and where it's at in Southeast Asia. So that's kind of the first question of, we have Twitch here. What do you all use?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question about, you know, Web3 and NFTs is, what is the reception like with the audience that you're working with? Because again, the North American audience has had a very, let's say, checkered response to incorporating NFTs and play and earn games. So yeah, so what are the streaming platforms and what's the attitude towards Web3 and crypto games where you're at?
Awesome. So I think to answer your first question, kind of taking it back a step, I think one of the most important things for people to understand is that Asia as a whole is extremely fragmented. It's very different to working in the US or Europe.
I wondered. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to interrupt. That's what I was thinking. I was like, I feel like the Chinese streaming services are not going to be popular in Southeast Asia.
They're certainly very different. And China sort of is a beast of its own, to be honest. But everything from the language element through to all of the different cultural nuances. I think it's really important to understand that every market is extremely different, and we have to take them in isolation. So, for us as a business, it's really important that we take a hyper-local approach as well to everything that we do. So, answering your question about the streaming platforms, it's really interesting that you generally see, if I'm going to generalize, that YouTube is actually the most prominent platform across the region. It's really seen a huge level of success over the years. But there definitely are different iterations across each of the markets as well. So Facebook is also extremely popular in certain markets. So for instance, in the Philippines, Facebook is a much bigger platform for the gaming and esports community than YouTube. And then in India, it's still very much about YouTube, but then you've also got some of these new streaming platforms emerging, like Loco and also Router as well, who essentially refer to themselves as the Twitch of India. So it's a really different and interesting dynamic there. So yes, it's definitely really fragmented, and we really have to take every market in isolation to assess which is the optimum platform that we want to be able to execute on in each market as well, and depending on the type of activation.
And then what were the attitudes towards Web3 play and earn games, NFTs in games? Like I said, in the US and North America, it's not good, which is sad to me personally. But I would love to know like what the attitudes are like where you're at and who you're working with.
Yeah, for sure. So look, I think there's definitely a huge amount of hype. I think one of the first exciting things to mention is that we are fully invested in this space. So in fact, we just hosted our Web3 launch event around 2 weeks ago in Bangkok, which was fantastic. There's a huge amount of interest and excitement. In fact, we well oversubscribed on the guest list as well, because I think so many people are really interested to learn about this space. And so sort of off the back of that, I think, yeah, one of the key elements here is education. I think there's a lot of people who are extremely skeptical, but I think at the same time, there's a lot of people who are eager to learn. So both on the B2B level and learn about the opportunities there. And we are already forging a lot of different exciting partnerships with virtual worlds in the metaverse, also with some of these global game publishers in the space, the likes of sort of an Animoca Brands or a Gala or a Sky Mavis, etc., which is super exciting. But it's also really interesting when we've conducted surveys with our esports communities recently around our teams. There's been a huge level of interest in learning about crypto and the NFT space, and also play and earn. So actually recently with some of the surveys that we conducted in Thailand with our Bacon Time community, who are very mobile focused, and then our MITH community, who are much more PC focused, around 85 to 95% said they were essentially interested to learn about crypto in the blockchain gaming space. So there's a huge amount of interest here, and also those that actually want to learn more about play and earn. So, you know, we foresee there's a huge opportunity, you know, with this younger generation, but it's very much about taking the first steps on education and giving them a level of confidence there as well. So making sure that everything that we do is focused on entertainment and having fun at the core. I think that's crucial, as we know, for any part of gaming. So every single activation that we are going to be taking in this space has to be entertaining and fun at its core. And also, I think really losing the jargon. There's so much jargon around from the metaverse and crypto and NFTs, and I think everyone just feels totally overwhelmed. So I think it's about ensuring that we're creating a sense of simplicity around it as well, to help people really understand and engage with the space. So I definitely think we've kind of got a lot of opportunity there with people in terms of interest levels. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is that, you know, from a Web3 perspective as well, like gaming has been at the core of that since like the start, right? You know, you've had Roblox, which started back in 2006, which is crazy to think. And they've got like something crazy, like over 200 million daily active users, you know? So from that element, and where we've got that younger audience who are very much digital natives, who are already interacting and finding their sort of social interactions taking place a lot of the time in this space as well, it's also quite natural to them. So as we see the development more of like these new virtual worlds in the metaverse, so we've got like the likes of Sandbox and Decentraland, and there's sort of a whole host of new virtual worlds opening up at the time. I foresee that actually it's a really natural fit with the esports and gaming communities as well. So I envisage that, the uptake is only going to continue to increase. And from the play and earn space as well, I think this is really interesting. So for us, as part of our Web3 business pillar, we've actually developed our new AMP Guild, focused on play and earn blockchain-based games. So we really want to be able to open up an opportunity for all players to earn for the time and effort that they're spending playing these sorts of games. So ultimately, like giving people control and ownership back of the time and money that they're spending when they're gaming, which of course has in the past not been possible in the same way. So for us, we really want to open up these opportunities and develop a sense of community, which again is at the core of everything that we want to really achieve and do. So an opportunity for everyone to be able to play, reap the rewards of that. Even at the next level, then think about how we can then take that to the competitive level. So start to pick out some of those real top players in this space as well, which in the web and earn space play and earn space is referred to as scholars, and actually starting to forge our own esports teams in the space too.
So following up on all that, I would love to hear, because you mentioned right at the end, and this is actually a perfect segue into the question that I wanted to ask. You started talking about developing esports teams and getting competitive players on a roster to then, do all the partnership, sponsorship things that you're doing with Ampverse. I'm wondering, first of all, it's just funny to me to think about a player playing a play and earn game and then also streaming it and making money on top. Like that's great. That's a good thing. It's just like the best form of double dipping I can think of, honestly. But I'm wondering what that looks like. Like, when you're talking about developing esports teams, particularly for players in kind of these newer spaces, especially, are you thinking about them in the same way that you're thinking of, say, a competitive CSGO team? And I would imagine that it's going to be different, but what elements are you kind of taking from, I guess, we're already getting to the point where it's traditional esports structure and thinking about bringing those into Web3? And where do you think there might be differences?
Yeah, absolutely. So, great question. Certainly, from the differences perspective, I would say it's more around sort of the game titles that are already out there in the play and earn space already, and versus what is obviously there from a traditional esports perspective. I think just taking a step back very quickly in terms of the games, it's probably worth me pointing out that obviously, given that this market is so fragmented in Southeast Asia, there's a huge difference in terms of the game titles that are actually being played, and a lot of which will be very different to the US and Europe as well. So, our esports teams in Thailand, we have two. One called Bacon Time, which is focused on mobile games. They play Arena of Valor, which is the most popular game in that market. It's actually known as Honor of Kings in China, but that's extremely popular in Thailand and then also in Vietnam. However, if we then go and look at markets like the Philippines and Indonesia, you've then got mobile titles like Mobile Legends Bang Bang, which is extremely popular as well as an esports title, and then also Dota 2. And then in India, you have BGMI, which is Battlegrounds Mobile India, which essentially is the same game as PUBG Mobile, but it was actually relaunched as BGMI by Krafton in the market, as sort of political conflict between India and China actually prevented a lot of the Chinese apps from being present in the market anymore. So in terms of the game titles, these esports titles as well that the teams are playing, they're extremely diverse across the region. But what I would say is that the most important thing is that they are, high quality, obviously highly competitive and fun. So I think from the point of view of the play and earn space, this is only just starting to reach a point really where there are games being launched into the market that are really starting to fit the bill to be classified as an esports game. So in fact, there's one particular game at the moment that our Play and Earn Guild have been already hosting tournaments as well, weekly tournaments for the community to enjoy. And that's called Spider Tanks, which is published by Gala Games. So we've already noticed a really significant uptake as well for this particular game format. So much so that we actually even took our play and earn guild team and esports teams. And also there were a range of other esports teams from across Africa, parts of Europe, as well, to actually play in a play and earn blockchain-based game esports tournament in Dubai. So that was awesome. I want to say that I think it's the first esports tournament, sorry, that has actually been hosted as a LAN event for any blockchain-based games to date, which was super exciting.
That is so
Really
cool.
cool. And in fact, sort of going back to your point about the players' side as well, we actually had one of our ex-pro players actually playing in our Ampverse Guild esports team for that specific event. And there are a number of our players that have actually really enjoyed the experience of playing this specific title. And they really feel that it's a competitive game that actually really has legs. So we're heavily invested in games really that actually have that esports element around them as well. So again, making it more exciting for the community, allowing us to set up tournaments with prize pools, etc. So yeah, I think there's still a long way to go, but definitely we're starting to see more of an emergence of sort of these play and earn based games that have that really competitive, fun element and are high enough quality to really justify kind of that esports title as well.
That is so cool. I can't believe that there's already like, tournaments happening. You know, I feel like everything is coming. I mean, it's tech, so everything moves at the speed of light, of course. But that's really really neat
Yeah.
and exciting. That's really cool. Um, let's back up for a second and actually talk about you because we've been talking about Ampverse this whole time. My plan for the episode was to talk about you first and then get into some of the work you're doing, but we just started off on such cool roads. I couldn't help but follow them. But I want to back up and I want to know how you wound up getting involved in Ampverse. And here you are talking about Web3 gaming. You're one of the few people I've met who does that really often. You know, like how did you get here? What's your story with that?
Good question. Really good question. It's not a conventional story at all. My actual background wasn't in gaming really before I joined Ampverse. I was a bit of a gamer when I was sort of much younger and in my teens. So starting from playing games on my dad's PC, like Prince of Persia. I'm now showing my age. So I used to love.
Such a good one, though. It's okay.
Oh, it's a classic, absolute classic. I used to love that. So games like Prince of Persia, obviously Mario Kart. So that was a big feature in our household, all the way through to then getting really into Quake as well. So my dad bought me Quake, and I started to become quite obsessed with that game. But really, that kind of interest in gaming sort of stopped in my late teens. I was going to university, etc. And so, yeah, that like sort of from that time, gaming didn't really kind of feature. I actually left university and went to Kantar, which is a part of WPP. And essentially, I was working on their graduate scheme in their Kantar World Panel division. So I was dealing at the time with consumer and shopper insights in grocery. So a very, very different world. I worked for them in London for about 3 years. Really kind of soaking up like a sponge all of the kind of key soft skills that I was able to develop. So how to kind of assess data and develop insights, how to create proposals, how to pitch to clients, and most importantly, also being able to really manage client relationships. And I think that's something that for me has always been the biggest passion point. I love working with people, and obviously trying to make sure that I'm kind of giving them the best possible service as possible. So yeah, I worked for them for about 3 years. I always had a love for Asia. I traveled in Asia already for a number of years as well, and specifically Thailand. A role came up in Thailand that was supposed to be a 6-month secondment, and it turned into 6.5 years. So I was doing a very similar role to the UK, but I had the opportunity to travel all over Asia, meeting new clients, presenting. I was in China 1 week, Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam. So you name it, I went everywhere. And I'm just so lucky to have such a fantastic opportunity and really kind of get under the skin of Asia and the different markets and the different cultural nuances as well. So yeah, I worked for them in Thailand for about 6.5 years. I then moved with my role and started working on the Procter and Gamble account for Asia and working with the global P&G hair care team as well out of Singapore. So that's 11 and a half years of my career gone, which was fantastic. And I had so many learnings and had developed so many core skills as well. The experience of working in Asia, of course, was fantastic. But I really kind of had that drive as well to move more into the kind of the creative space. So I actually went to completely the opposite side. I went from working in a massive corporate to working for SMEs and startups. So I actually worked for 2 global open source creative platforms, helping creators, essentially freelancers, etc., to be able to kind of partner up with big global brands on their creative campaigns. And actually, the latter company that I worked with is where I really started getting into the gaming space again. Gaming was just starting to be talked about a lot as well, and the industry and the opportunities. And I was pitching to the likes of EA and then also Animoca Brands as well, who are a blockchain-based developer and publisher, and also a venture capitalist company as well. So that was when I really started to jump into the gaming space and really realized how much I loved it and was very passionate about the opportunity, the sense of kind of community that surrounded gaming as well, and also just the sheer sense of diversity as well. So it really fascinated me. I met my now boss when we were actually starting a discussion on potentially partnering up at the time between our 2 companies. He was just launching Ampverse. And in fact, that ended up then being a job offer on the table for me to join them. So that was in November 2019. So I'll be honest, I was very nervous. I think purely my the pressure being on myself as well, because I really didn't feel overly confident yet in the gaming space. I'd only sort of starting to learn the industry for about a year or so, but I was also super excited. And I think one of the key things for me, and I've sort of always had instilled in me as well, is you can achieve anything if you really set your mind to it and dedicate your time and you work hard. So for me, it was all about the research element. I was reading so many articles, watching videos, and really trying to get under the skin of the gaming and esports space in the region. So it's been a fantastic opportunity, and it's kind of brought me to where I am today, 2.5 years later, in my dream job.
Which is so fun. This is a question that I think we talked a little bit about when I initially met you, but one thing I would love to know about is if you were able to kind of bring a lot of the consumer insights work into what you do now. I would imagine that that's an extremely valuable knowledge base to have when you're trying to build an audience and build a brand. So what came over from your time working in consumer insights?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, super good point. Well, I think from the start, having been very immersed in kind of the data and insight space, I think for me, it was a crucial element of sort of generating an educational piece for, well, one, myself, but also for potential clients and partners as well in this particular space. So data and insights to me have always been a fundamental part of working together with any brands and partners as well, to really give them the reassurance of the opportunity within the space, and also where there's that level of authenticity and the right fit as well. So trying to understand the trends in the markets, as I mentioned earlier, this region particularly is extremely fragmented, so it's really important to understand the nuances in every single market. And so for me, that was a huge learning that I actually took from my days working in the market research world as well, really being able to take that data and create stories as well around the communities in each of the markets, and really being able to highlight what those business opportunities might be. And of course, there's so many different opportunities, and this is why we're developing such an extensive suite of products as well. So, it's the same with any form of kind of creative and advertising. for some brands, it's going to be a best fit to be focusing sort of on the original content opportunities as well, and how to reach the community. In other respects, it might be tournaments, because actually the brand itself is the right fit, who the audience is, that they have that natural synergy there, and the messaging as well. So there's so many different opportunities and routes, but I think everything comes back to the data and insights, and trying to ensure that we've got sort of an authentic fit between sort of the products that we are proposing to the brands and how they can best reach their target audience as well. So I would say that is definitely the one thing that has definitely been instilled into me from the start.
So going along with that and your experience as someone who has worked a lot with consumer insights and with data, how are you able to, like, I guess this is more of an advice question. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to identify where they can fill in a gap? Like, what questions do you ask yourself to be able to say, like, okay, I want to be the one that organizes tournaments, or I want to be the one that makes content plays? Like, for anyone out there who's working on a team or is interested in working with, esports at large, what questions do you ask yourself to know what you should be doing?
Very good question. So I think one of the most important and the fundamental part really is who are that audience? So who are these people that are actually kind of engaging in this specific space? So for instance, if it's content series and we're trying to think about what are the platforms that we should be looking at in terms of distribution, who are the audience base on each of these platforms as well? And are they going to be the right fit for this content series that we're actually planning to develop? And then off the back of that, who are the appropriate talents that we then want to bring into that content series as well? So it's very much trying to gain an understanding initially of, like, who are those people that we're trying to reach? Where can we best find them? So on which platforms, or if it's an offline event, from a location perspective, what's the kind of footfall? Who are the types of, sort of shoppers or consumers who are going to be attending in those spaces as well? Or, and then also, like, how do we design a program that is going to best fit for that audience? And also then for the brands or partners that we're going to be involving. But everything really first starts with the audience and who we're trying to reach, and on what platforms that we can actually best reach them overall. And then the next part is about what do we want to feature in that program? Who do we want to integrate? Who is then going to best appeal to that audience? And who is also then an authentic fit with that brand partner that we're bringing in as well. So there's many different elements that we kind of have to factor into that understanding. I'd say that one of the most challenging things still to date is sort of centralized research resources. I think that's still one of the biggest challenges for the gaming and the esports industry as a whole. There's so many different avenues and routes and sources that you can tap into. So I still very much find that trying to build out a story can be extremely time consuming and quite a challenge. There's a lot of different sources that you can go to. But having said that, I'm noticing that there's still a wealth of information that is still starting to build out there. We've got the likes of Newzoo, who are a great source of kind of top line data for the gaming and esports space. And they really do start to drill down into the specific regions and markets in Asia as well, which is fantastic. Also the likes of YouGov, they actually created a fantastic white paper thought leadership piece last year, which was fantastic, all about sort of profiling gamers and the platforms that they like to watch and consume esports, all the way through to kind of the profile of who these fans are as well. So there was a huge amount of insight from that. But we're definitely having to still cherry pick a lot from various different sources to really get to the crux of, what does this kind of industry look like, and how can we best activate and execute within that as well. And also, of course, then bringing in the brand partners and making sure that there's that level of authenticity too. So for us, as I mentioned earlier, that, conducting our community surveys has been really important and also really interesting. So I mentioned earlier some of those learnings that we also understood about play and earn, where a huge amount of the community were really interested in crypto. But obviously they still felt they had to learn a lot and there was a lot of education needed. So, that's a learning we can take when we're going to go into chat to potential crypto partners and sponsors as well. And, let them know that obviously as a foundational element, if you want to try and really engage with this audience and connect with them, we've got to think about how can we start with an educational focus in a fun way. We know the community want to learn. How can we achieve that with you? So yeah, there's that the community surveys have definitely been invaluable to us to understand what does our community really want? What do they look for? If I'm going to be thinking about who am I going to partner with from a music label or artist perspective, who do these community members resonate with? Like, who's important to them? And again, being fragmented markets, we can't just assume that we can develop one partnership that will be a fit all for the whole region. Every market's different. So understanding those local market nuances, understanding our community as well is really important.
That makes so much sense. And I formerly worked as in a data analytics position, and yes, the lack of data for me is one of the toughest parts about esports. I'm like, there's nothing to run regressions on. I can't figure out anything.
I have a lot of hours Googling and searching the net for, all sorts of different insights to try and build together the stories. And you know what, there is so much out there. There is so much out there, but I think, there's still a long way to go before we can really kind of, find a sort of more centralized sources ultimately to really help us kind of tell those stories as effectively as possible.
Yeah, YouGov and Newzoo have both been very helpful, but I'm definitely looking forward to, because they put out really great insights, right? But I want like the back end stuff, I want the data.
You want the numbers.
Right. Like I want to, and we're just not at a point in the industry where those data sets, and everyone who's ever been in data knows that the hardest part about being in data is getting the data set together. Like this is not a novel problem in esports by any means. It's just that the fact that, I mean, if you compare to like so many of like grocery industries, there's like 100+ years worth of stuff you can look at. And so it's just different. This is such a young industry, so there's time. But yeah, definitely building those data sets. I'm like, oh, there's no Bureau of Labor Statistics for esports yet.
Not at all. Not at all. No.
So yes, it is a dream of mine to get there someday, but I totally understand that pain. Well, Jen, you've just given me so much to think about, which has been so great. I'm going to quickly summarize some of the points that we talked about, and then we'll get into our last section here. So we started with online services and influencers. Games and tournaments, even online, generate lots of UGC that help further build the brand. Focus is still online. It doesn't even have to necessarily be in real life. You can still have these events, and you can have that kind of similar engagement that creates all that content to then be able to further engage with fans. So it's kind of a self-feeding cycle. We talked, or you mentioned a bit about the Nescafe partnership, and you mentioned Gillette as well. These are both really unique, I thought. I think that the Nescafe, the opportunity to go buy something in real life and then enter into that raffle, that opportunity to go play with professional esports players, is a really cool bridge between real life and online worlds. So it was really, really neat activation there. I also mentioned that as we get into more real life events, you're looking to do hyper local tournaments. That the Asian market at large is really fragmented, so it's going to be different approaches in different areas. Taking each market in isolation is really important for deciding what to execute on. And we then talked about that in relationship to platforms. And I know that you had mentioned Facebook and YouTube are big platforms in the region, although in different places, one is bigger than the other. And then in other regions, there's other completely different third parties that are bigger than both of those. So it's really split up in that way. Whereas I definitely think that we are very used to a Twitch dominated environment in North America. What you do at Ampverse, you're also looking towards the future, towards the metaverse, fully invested into Web3. I think that the surveys that you stated were so cool, that there's so much interest in learning about the space, but that education is going to be a key element in getting any partnerships, any collaborations off the ground. people want to learn about crypto and play and earn, but there's still a huge gap in how to do that from both a B2C and a B2B level. So it's going to take a little bit for that. However, you mentioned that you already have a guild that is focused on play and earn and blockchain-based games, and that they have been able to host events, have tournaments, and do a lot of the things that we think of as traditional esports in games that are not blockchain-based, which is so cool. When it comes to your journey on getting into gaming and esports, I think you give really good advice in saying, read as much as you can, put your mind into it as much as you can, and don't be afraid to get started without the deepest knowledge base. So if you're passionate about it, get out there, just put your mind to it and work a little bit harder maybe at the beginning to build yourself up, but you don't need to know everything going in. There's definitely an on-the-job element to any training. And then we talked a lot about you coming from the market research world, taking different business opportunities into different markets. And the one question I asked you was kind of, what do you think about when you're creating a new opportunity? Because you had mentioned that brands have different fits for what they should be doing. So to figure out what you should be doing within esports, first think about the audience, then try to identify the platforms that audience is on, then think about the talent that's going to have not only the best content fit, but also an authentic feeling fit, which is that word that the esports industry loves to use.
Yeah.
And then after that, try to figure out what you're actually going to do once you have all those steps in place. And we talked about how one of the biggest challenges to that is having centralized data and resources. So we need more data. If anyone out there is listening who wants to build a giant data brand or build the Bureau of Labor Statistics for gaming and esports, call me. I got ideas. Right? Yeah. Call both of us. So Jen, so much to talk about, so much to think about. The thing that I love to end with in every episode is what I like to call the moment of reflection, just a chance for you to look back on your career, how you got to where you are. And I like to ask, what is one thing you would like to tell your younger self about getting into the gaming industry and being successful?
I love this question. I love listening to this on every episode of your podcast. I always find it so fascinating. You know, everyone's got very sort of different backgrounds, based in different locations as well. So I always find it really interesting. For me, I would say it dates back to sort of my teen years, really, where, you know, and I alluded to this earlier as well, and moving into the gaming space, but my dad kind of instilled into me, you know, you really need to work hard to get where you want to be and to reap the rewards. So even at a young age, you know, if I wanted to be able to do something for myself rather than just sort of having something handed to me, I really had to dedicate all my energy, time, and effort to be able to, you know, maybe it was working at a bakery when I was 14. If I wanted to go to the movies with my friends, you know, as simple as that. But like, you know, working hard to then be able to reap the rewards and enjoy. And this very much has kind of been instilled in me throughout my career as well. And I think it's been crucially important as well. Like, my career path has obviously not been an obvious one. You know, starting off in market research, and I never even thought about working in the gaming industry. You know, it didn't even cross my mind. And, you know, the path that I've taken, the leap of faith that I took to move to Asia, which has then turned into my home for the last 14 years, you know, and taking the big leap from a corporate to small, medium-sized startups as well. So, you know, there's so many different leaps of faith that I've sort of taken along the route. So I think I would definitely tell myself, younger self, don't be afraid to do that. You know, that really there is nothing to lose. You've got nothing to lose, you know, only to gain from experience. Every role is a learning experience. So, you know, take out of it everything that you can, soak up all of that information and the skill sets, you know, that you can from every single role, which will then better you for the next role that you're going to take on as well. And, you know, it might not be an obvious path at the time, but somehow, you know, with hard work, dedication, and a little bit of faith, I think, you know, you can end up landing your dream job. And essentially, I have to say that's where I feel I am today. I still look back and wonder how on earth I got here, but you know, I'm loving every minute of it. It was a hard way through COVID, having just started the job role, but yeah, I'm seeing a lot of great things ahead, and yeah, just excited to see where things are really going to start shaping further in the gaming and esports space. So yeah.
So fun. So what I heard from that was study up, work hard, and take risks.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't live in regret.
I like it. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been so much fun for me. I mean, Ampverse is just fascinating, and what you're doing is fascinating. It's totally new and fun approach to games, and the focus on fun is really clear. And I hope that more companies start to do that more often. Where can people find you, follow Ampverse, learn more, plug all the things?
Absolutely. Yes, please do. So you can find me on LinkedIn as Jenny Hall. So I'm at Ampverse, Head of Strategic Partnerships. So that's probably the easiest way to reach me directly. I don't tend to use my kind of social media quite so much for the kind of business side of things. I seem to spend most of my life on it, to be honest, just from our creator and team's perspective. I barely use it for my own benefit. And then on top of that, you can follow Ampverse on LinkedIn as well for all the latest updates on our teams and talents, new product developments, etc. So yeah, we'd love for you to follow us, and please reach out to me if you have any questions at all, or you just want to thrash out some thoughts on the gaming and esports space as well. So yeah, I'm always here.
So fun. For all the listeners out there, be sure to leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Check out other Holodeck Media podcasts, including Meta Business and Business of Esports. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, which I also occasionally use or don't use for personal and business purposes. It's all mixed up at Lindsay Poss. And you can catch me live on Wednesday afternoons now. We have a new time on the Business of Esports Live After Show. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us here on Meta Woman. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast everywhere you get your podcasts, leave a 5-star review, and tell your friends, family, and colleagues all about us. Also, make sure to follow Meta TV on all socials to get more of the best metaverse content anywhere. Tune in every week for another episode of Meta Woman.